So on Monday, Trump met with Governor Gavin Newsom and California officials regarding the wildfires raging across the state. And there were some cringe moments. One that everyone just can't seem to get enough of is when one of the officials says, if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians. And Trump responds, okay, it'll start to get cooler. You just watch. The official responds, I wish the science agreed with you. And Trump says, I don't think the science knows actually. Apparently, science doesn't know anything since 2017. But here we are. So, yeah, this vegetation management, forest management that they're talking about, Trump brings it up and is really making it the main issue here. Now, is forest management a factor in all this? Of course it is. No one's debating that. And, if you have dead trees lying around that can definitely fuel the fires, of course, it's an issue. Even though the majority of the forests in the state belong to the federal government. So the issue is that climate change is the biggest factor of them all. Okay? I mean, it's not like forest management has all of a sudden become an issue. There's always been dead trees, and there's always been a chance for those to ignite. But now the situation is getting worse because of climate change, because of these record temperatures. I mean, just take a look at the numbers here. I mean, the state endured a record-shattering August heat wave and all-time hottest September records this week. And then since 1970, the wildfire season is 105 days longer on average, and wildfire numbers more than tripled since then. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but this smoke that's coming from these fires have reached as far as New York City. I mean, it's literally hazing the sky. That's how bad it is. Now, a popular misconception is that it doesn't rain in California much, which, I mean, that's false, okay? The state simply has one of the most well-defined wet seasons, usually from November to April. And when it rains, it pours. So they do get rain. It's just right now we're in the dry season. And it is arguably one of the driest times in the state's history. And climate change is fueling this. Now, one of the problems Trump keeps mentioning besides forest management, well, I guess it's part of it, right, is these beetles. And what he's mentioning in this meeting is regarding specifically to bark beetles, right? And these little critters are responsible for helping to kill millions of trees along with the droughts, which makes them prone to wildfires. And as a result, they're easily flammable. They're just literally in the way, ready to be just burst into flames. So, in fact, during the meeting, while one of the officials was pointing to the map of the state of California and outlining the areas where most of these dead trees were concentrated, Trump asked, would those trees have died anyway from the beetle? And the official responds, yeah, they died from beetles, but then he also adds from drought. Trump conveniently sidesteps that latter part of that statement and just goes on to say, so they were largely dead, or the area was largely dead in terms of the trees. So I find this segment really interesting because he's continuing to shift the focus here away from drought and climate change over to constant forest management. And again, mind you, most of this forest belongs to the federal government. Hello? Now, the reason why these beetles are an issue even more now than they were before is because of climate change, right? Usually the cooler winters are what make them go away, right? But because of climate change, the average temperatures continue to rise And as a result, there's no reason for them to leave. I mean, their average time they're remaining is increasing. This means more dead trees and bigger wildfires. In fact, the Camp Fire that happened back in 2018, this was one of the biggest reasons why. It was so big and explosive because the temperatures have risen so much, and accompanied by drought, it aggravated the situation even worse. As a result, climate change is largely the cause. Unfortunately, Trump just continues to shift the focus away. And I mean, it's unsurprising. This is the same man that has rolled back so many of the environmental regulations we fought so hard to enact in the first place. I mean, since 2017, when he came into office, he has dedicated himself to reversing 100 environmental policies, of which 68 he has completed. 19 of them were related to air pollution and emissions. Not to mention the fact that he withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accords and is essentially bending the Environmental Protection Agency to his will. It literally is just a puppet of his administration. They have no independence and therefore cannot do their job. And the U.S. has largely failed in this regard. Supposedly, they should have been one of the leaders against the fight against climate change, but here we are, wildfires in California, and not even just in California now. It's spread into Oregon, and all hell is breaking loose on the West Coast. So definitely great job there, Mr. President. And, I'm not sure what the climate change deniers get out of all of this. Like, seriously, what did they get out of this? Some satisfaction that they're right and we're wrong? Or maybe it's the corporations and these oil companies, which I'm glad they're declining because it couldn't have come at a better time. They really need to go. But, I mean, what? These corporations, maybe because they don't have to pay less by not having to abide by so many environmental regulations? Is that what we're talking about here? So maybe in the short term, they're getting something out of it, but they're just shooting themselves in the foot and screwing the rest of us along the way in the long run. Either way, the consequences will come to light and will be even further aggravated, which we're seeing proof of that right now. The wildfires are worse than they were before. The drought is worse than it was before. All in all, we really are too late. We keep thinking as if we have this magical period of time where we can just ignore this and continue to kick the can down the road, but we can't. The consequences are here, and the best we can do now is damage control and preventing further issues. I mean, there's multiple studies out there and a broad consensus that now, even if we reverse a lot of the emissions that we've let out, we're most likely not going to be able to reverse the damage that has already been done. So think about that, right? What is the point, right? So yes, maybe we are making a big deal about climate change. Maybe more so than is justified. Maybe, just maybe, right? But it's better to be safe than sorry. And in this scenario, we're definitely feeling sorry for ourselves. I just can't. And I mean, if the fires weren't enough, Hurricane Sally made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane around 4:45 a.m. Central Time on Tuesday, with winds of 105 miles per hour, which it's not the strongest storm by any measure or any means, but it hit Pensacola, Florida pretty hard regardless. And some of these areas are covered with more than 24 inches of rain, and that number could rise to 35 inches by the time the storm recedes. Power has been knocked out for more than 500,000 people, and that's just Florida and Georgia. That's it. So, flooding in the Gulf and the East Coast will only intensify as the tide surge increases and sea levels rise. And whether you believe in climate change or not, even though it is real, the waters are rising. That is undisputable. So, in fact, the reason why I'm content not living on any of these coastal areas is because many of these areas will need to either build very expensive infrastructure to prevent flooding, which could still fail, as we've seen in a lot of cases, or they'll have to migrate further inland or raise up the land, I guess. But still, all of this is extremely costly, and really all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid over the wound. We're not stopping the bleeding. We're merely just compressing it. But the problem is still there. And even us in the Great Plains and the Midwest regions, we aren't necessarily safe either, right? Just because we're not next to a coastal region or we're not on the West Coast where it's burning hellfire right now, we could also experience droughts, other issues, and we could experience flooding as well. We're not immune or safe from this issue. So let's not think in false terms. That's not reality, right? Now, maybe this will make you happy. Now, there is a broadening consensus that the number of storms, hurricanes, will actually decrease, which sounds great, right? Until you realize that the actual strength of these less frequent storms will more than make up for it in their intensity. And I'd rather take more minor storms over a major storm any day, especially when it comes to insurance, right? Most of these insurance companies are redrawing their maps. They're looking at all these situations going around West Coast, Gulf, East Coast, even in the Midwest and the Great Plains regions. They're looking at this and saying, holy crap, we cannot insure these homes anymore. It's just too much of a risk. I mean, in California, you could rebuild a home and know that the chances of it getting burned down are extremely high. I mean, these wildfires are no joke. In fact, most of these homeowners, now the insurance companies are just refusing to insure them. That's also happening in the Gulf due to these hurricanes, flooding, and it's only going to get worse. Now, the reason why this consensus is here regarding the less frequent storms is because of the rising ocean temperatures, right? But these rising ocean temperatures are really the main cause of these stronger storms. And it's not just because the ocean temperatures are rising and the storms that are the issue. It's also because all this carbon dioxide that's being absorbed by the oceans, essentially, because let's not forget here, the oceans are by far the largest carbon sink on this planet. The ocean is literally acidifying, which is killing off vast marine life and putting a dent in our ecosystem. That's the reason why we're seeing so many of these coral reefs dying. These whole ecosystems are changing right before our eyes. And the cause? You guessed it. Look, much of global warming is the result of our emissions. That cannot be disputed. And, although many might think that there's no way in hell mere humans could cause change on such a global scale, well, we made nuclear weapons, right? I mean, thank God we're not firing them at each other right now, or we'd have more than climate change to worry about. I think we continue to underestimate the capabilities of the human race, and that is well documented across history. But time and time again, we prove to ourselves that we are more than capable of going beyond what we could have previously imagined. Hence the word unimaginable. So yes, we are capable of this. And I'm sure we had a very big role to play in global warming. Much of these emissions, mind you, come from power consumption. So even with the lights we have on and the electricity that we're using, a lot of this comes from fossil fuels. So it's ever more important for people to consider renewable energy. The global movement toward renewables is here to stay, and how fast we can transform our grids will be a prime factor to averting further climate crises.